One of the areas that we've been kind of looking closely at, network devices, legacy devices, unmanaged devices. There's a wealth of those out there connecting organizations to the internet. Edge devices were targeted in nearly 40% of China-Nexus exploitation. 67% of vulnerabilities exploited by China-Nexus adversaries provided immediate system access. Warp Panda had 22 months of persistent access in one of the longest running intrusions that we saw.
When we think about how do you respond and how do you prepare for China, it's not much different than how do you prepare and respond to a ransomware attack. Many times we see the initial access vector for a ransomware attack is just a vulnerability that was patched, reverse engineered, and then used by e-crime actors. But ultimately, you look back, that vulnerability was initially exploited by China, sometimes for months or years before it was discovered by a team like mine. And so you have to understand what your external attack surface is. What devices do you have out there? Who do you use for your VPN provider? Who do you use for your cloud access broker? Who do you use for your SASE solution? What is there and how do you defend against it? The number one way to do that is to patch fast. Um, we talk to organizations, say they have a 24, 48, hour patch window for critical vulnerabilities.
What defines critical in that case, though? Is it CVSS score? Is it prevalence? Because I think we see a lot of organizations, last year, this time, there was a big Palo Alto issue where there was two vulnerabilities. And, one of them was like a CVSS of 5 point something, and it was a unprivileged or unauthenticated remote access. And a lot of organizations looked at that, the 5 point whatever didn't hit that severity on the criticality. So they pushed that one aside. They look at the next vulnerability on the stack, and this is a local privilege escalation with a 8.8 or something like that. And they look at that and they're like, wow, that's pretty severe. We should patch, but it's a local privilege escalation.
Yeah.
You need to have remote access to use that. So we'll pet that off till next month.
Well,
but if you chain those two together, it's a kill shot.
Yeah, and I think it's looking at, as you said, looking at more than the CVS score, looking at the prevalence, looking at is it in the wild, using your threat intelligence. I mean, we get a lot, when we talk to customers and we build our tabletop scenarios, and when we build, work on our red team, blue teams, we're using CrowdStrike intelligence to say, what do you actually need to look at?
Right. What's being actively
What's being actually
Which
exploited?
adversaries target you and
So if it's China, actively exploiting that vulnerability, and you're an organization that has a nexus to, either manufacturing, trades, or tariffs, maybe you want to bring up the priority of patching those vulnerabilities.
right. Summer of Murky Panda.
The summer of Murky Panda and the summer of Scattered. So
Scattered, yeah.
last summer was a very busy time
Yeah.
for our team.
Well, China has been absolutely just killing it on the vulnerability side. And I think with generative AI I'm always asked about what are threat actors doing with Gen AI. And a lot of times it's the less sophisticated adversaries kind of use it to their detriment. More sophisticated adversaries get a little bit more out of it. China and other countries, I think, are really going to be able to leverage generative AI for vulnerability identification and weaponization because AI is perfect for that, right? Like, there's really two ways to do vulnerabilities exploit dev, right? Um, there's the artisanal way where you completely reverse engineer the target and you figure out everything about it, how it works, and build the most beautiful, perfect exploit. And what most people do, fuzzing, right? So they go through and they throw a bunch of data at it and see where it breaks and analyze the crash dump. Gen AI is perfect for that. And we've seen that's already been demonstrated. I've done it personally to find vulnerabilities in GitHub repos and things like that. So, I think it's only a matter of months before we start to see an explosion of vulnerabilities either because of fuzzing or because they've used generative AI to reverse engineer vulnerability disclosure or something like that. And I think China is going to be leading the way. Operator Panda, also known as Salt Typhoon, one of the ones that we spent a lot of time on this year. We had a complete blind spot to seeing anything inside of. They were targeting a lot of Cisco infrastructure. And what we ended up doing was we instrumented every piece of equipment that we could find. I had a team buying them off like Craigslist and stuff like that, and finding all of the hardware we could, and then figuring out how can we instrument that in a next-gen SIM so we could actually hunt for Operator Panda. And now we have, well over 3 or 4 dozen hunting patterns for Operator Panda across legacy infrastructure without any sort of CrowdStrike visibility other than through next-gen SIM.